Okay, so Semester 2, Lecture 2, Controllers and Scaffolding. This is primarily going to be a practical session. I would like to change the way that we're working with the lectures for the next few weeks as we start to focus on the assignment for Semester 2, which is on ShoeSpace. If you haven't looked at it now, would be a very good time to do that. So far with MVC we've looked at app creation, domain models, and last week we looked at simple controllers. At the end of this week I would like you to definitely have finished all the controller tasks from last week and to be familiar with this concept of scaffolded views and controllers that I'm going to talk about. You should be able to use the scaffolding mechanism to generate basic controllers and views, and you should understand the kind of pitfalls of scaffolding and why we use scaffolding in web development architectures and workflows. There's a dictionary definition of building scaffolding, which I'm not going to read to you, but you get the idea that it's something that goes up on the outside of a building whilst we're working on the contents. Scaffolding in the context of web applications allows us very quickly to create a user interface for our domain model. It's particularly useful for entering reference data and initial data entry. It's also useful for exploratory prototyping and rapid development. I can very quickly create a full view and controller pairing for any of my domain classes. So if I put the time and effort into the domain class construction and I use all those annotations, the has one, has many, scaffolding can use that as metadata to power the creation of code that will let me edit that data. It's not intended to be a final solution. Scaffolding is a way of getting up and running very quickly. So far we've looked at app creation, domain model creation, and simple controllers. It was a little bit naughty of me to make you jump through the hoop of creating controllers last week, since that's not the normal way that you will generate those controllers. Normally you'll create the controllers as a part of a scaffolding process, and then you'll modify those controllers, but you will still use create controller, so you should understand it, and the controllers which the scaffolding process generates are just ordinary controllers, so it's important that you understand what's going on with them. But scaffolding is a very quick way of generating functional controllers, and you'll see that the scaffolding which we're going to generate in a little while are non-trivial. So there's a new command. We've looked at Grail's create app, we've looked at create domain class, and we've looked at create controller. We're now going to look at a command called Grail's generate all, which takes as a parameter a fully qualified domain class name. You can only generate a scaffold based on a domain class, and there's a one-to-one correspondence between a scaffold, the component, and a domain class, if you like, if you're into your Jackson structured programming there. You won't generate scaffolds for all your domain classes. You will choose a primary class, so orders but not order lines. So the header items, if you like, the has one part of a has one / one-to-many relationship. So you'll have to be very careful and quite judicious in choosing candidate domain classes to put through the scaffolding process. You don't want to pipe all your classes through. You'll pick some primary classes that are going to be the drivers for your application, and those second classes you will generally interact with through your controller code, so as a side effect almost of modifying other data. So two things to note, and the first important one: a scaffolded controller in view captures the domain model as it was at a point in time. Be careful if you change the domain model subsequently. If you consider what happens, I generate a scaffolded controller in view, then I change the domain model. The controller has no way about knowing the changes that I've just made unless I regenerate the scaffolded controller in view, and that might mean losing changes that I had already made by hand. So be careful, and that's probably one of the reasons it's important to do your domain modeling and your upfront. As we always have with application development, the data model, once it's set, tends to be relatively stable and only grow. If you add fields or add relationships, you'll normally add them by hand to your scaffolded controllers and views rather than regenerating them because you're going to be making changes. The second note is that scaffolded views and controllers are not intended to be a final solution. They're intended to get you a good step along the way and to get you on the ground running, but a solution is not a domain model that's had its scaffolded controllers and views generated and then is deployed. The idea is to get you the 80% of the way there with the 20% of the effort, and then the remaining 20% will take 80% of the effort, and that's where your work has to be. It's doing all the simple stuff for you, but you still need to actually do the hard work, which is application development. So, as I said, this is primarily a practical session, despite the fact that I've waffled on briefly. There are two tasks. The first one is to make sure you've completed last week's tasks. If you haven't, get to it. Create yourself an application with a calc controller and an add action, which can add two parameters. So I've given you a URL here, add (A equals 1 and B equals 2, and then return a value like 1 plus 2 equals 3. So that's the task from last week. If you've not finished that, please do that before you move on to the controller stuff, because you need to understand it. The second task is, and this is where we're back into the grounds of the assignment. I'm going to show you one of these. You know the rules for plagiarism. This assignment has to be your work. You need to do this your own way, but I am going to demonstrate how to do one of these, and you will probably follow my rules, to the letter, or my example to the letter, in which case initially you will end up with the same thing as me, but that's because we're both generating scaffolded views. The way that you express your own work and the way that you will make your work unique is by modifying the scaffolded views, the way you document it, the way you write it up. Okay, so I expect that these apps will, one or two of you will do a blinding job, and your apps will look nothing like the others, and they'll be commented to the hilt with great variable names and great documentation. But I fully expect that a lot of the apps will look like the generated scaffolds. The way that you must differentiate your work is by documenting it, by commenting it, and by writing up in a unique way. So the focus here isn't so much the code as all the things you put around it. Okay, we're working towards your assignment here, and I'm going to talk about that at the start of class. So let's have a look, shall we? Here's my dev directory. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to do this using my personal GitHub account rather than the ACESII one. So here's the class project right now for eRegister. It's got a README. Actually, I need to fix that typo there, but we can sort it out later.